Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it's great, as always, to be with you. Now, look out for a special episode of Dennis and Julie this Sunday, obviously sans Dennis, as he continues to recover slowly but surely in the hospital. But this Sunday, we will be featuring not only myself, but the one and only Sean McConnell, who will be coming on for a second time to substitute for Dennis. Speaking of which, hi, Sean, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
We just filmed that episode right before this, and I think it was a great one. We talked about religion and the various debates that surround Christianity, sola scriptura, the depictions of Jesus, the Trinity. It was a very rich theological discussion, I thought, and included some humor.
Yeah, it was fun. I feel awkward doing that because who am I? I'm not Dennis Prager. And but it went well. I'll say that. It went well.
Well, you've been working with Dennis for coming up on 20 years, so you've absorbed through osmosis, at the very least, some of his wisdom, and I think that it was spectacular. And you don't give yourself enough credit. What's this?
We talked about my new Christmas tradition.
Oh yes, we did in the final few minutes. Yeah, that one is a doozy. Speaking of a doozy, my gosh, I told you yesterday that I am utterly fascinated by this Luigi Mangione character who was arrested at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania on Monday for being the primary suspect in the assassination last Wednesday, a week ago today, of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now, we found out that last night a manifesto, a short paragraph that he had in his possession, was released to the public, indicating a little bit about his motive. And as I said, females tend to like true crime. Men are more into actually committing the crime, but females are the ones who like to analyze it. And here is the manifesto. As I said, it's just a paragraph, and I think every word is revelatory. Let's put up picture one. He wrote, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic computer design, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook of present has some straggling notes and to-do lists that eliminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down," he says, "because I work in engineering. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done," he says. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the United States has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. And he says, United is the largest company in the US by market cap, but then our life expectancy hasn't grown. The reality is these people have gotten too powerful. They continue to abuse our country for profit, and the American public has allowed them to get away with it. He says the problem is more complex. He says, I don't pretend to be the most qualified person, but then he cites a book illustrating how corrupt and greedy, as he said, the medical system is. And then he ends it by saying, it is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. Now, yesterday we talked on the show about some reporting that has been dug up about his online presence. And we discussed how he commented on the Unabomber Manifesto's book on Goodreads. He gave it 4 stars. And he wrote that the Unabomber, quote, had the to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere. And so we see here that this individual feels it was an obligation of his to execute this individual because he thinks that essentially that is what the healthcare system is doing to Americans. That was echoed by a piece in the New Yorker where one Sarah Jones wrote that the healthcare system is so hopelessly corrupt, and that I think I have it right here. Sarah Jones. See, when you're live, you can stall a little bit.
Here, allow
Or
me
you
to
have
stall for you. I have a reaction to that guy's manifesto.
I actually have it quicker
You
than
have it?
I. Yes, she says the UnitedHealthcare does not pull a trigger and shoot its victims in the street, but it's killing people nonetheless. And what we talked about yesterday was this incredibly dangerous malleability of words and of concepts. That essentially, if a company is, their clients are dying, then it's acceptable to kill the head of the company. That if something is not right, if something is in need of change and of revolution, then violence is compulsory. We talked about how during Black Lives Matter, they said silence is violence, and how those equation of terms has led to something like this, where people think that these violence can be taken out of its proper place and applied to these situations in the name of social issues. I remember during BLM thinking, no, silence is not violence. Silence is silence. Violence is violence. We cannot mix up what these things mean, because soon they will be devoid of any kind of meaning and any kind of moral weight and just be used superfluously. Sean, I'm not saying this for the intention to stall. I'm curious if you actually did have a reaction to this.
Yeah, no, as you're reading that manifesto, and Carl read it this morning, there's stuff in that manifesto I completely agree with.
Right. Yeah.
But where he goes wrong is the arrogance to think that he's the first person to ever deal with it. And second of all, to think that killing somebody is going to solve anything is ridiculous.
Or that
especially when it's a corporation. Even if you kill a guy, which is completely wrong and shouldn't have been done, they'll replace him with another guy. Yeah. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It's going to happen. So, yes, there were things that are wrong that he identifies about the healthcare system. It needs to be fixed. But this is not how you do it.
Right.
And it's disturbing that people can get to this level and think that is actually a justifiable thing to do.
Well, as I said, it's not shocking because, again, during Black Lives Matter, where I think a lot of this metastasized and became part of the mainstream, when they were rioting and looting, they said, oh, well, it's not violence if you're taking back what's yours. And that's what they said in justification for Hamas's atrocities on October 7th. Oh, they're not, killing people or raping people. They're not doing harm. They're taking back what's theirs. And it's total left-wing subversion and changing of these concepts. And this is what it's led to, where people, again, think it is compulsory to do such a thing. Now, on Alex Berenson's Substack, there was a comment I want to draw to your attention that was poking a bit of a hole in this guy's argument. Obviously, the biggest hole in his argument is that there is no justification for killing a human being ever, except in direct self-defense if you feel like that person is harming you. Besides that, never is it ever okay to kill a human being. But this guy who commented, his name is JD Free here on the Alex Berenson Substack. He said, was this guy actually dumb enough to do the life expectancy stat? Left-wing propaganda just destroyed 2 lives, his and Thompson's, if that is the case. Life expectancy is the product of many factors. And yes, it is true that the U.S. healthcare system is a more positive factor than the systems of other countries. But culture and ethnicity are big factors, those that have to be considered. And here's the last part. He says, as of a few years ago, Norway has the highest national life expectancy in Europe, but Norwegian Americans had a higher life expectancy than Norway does. He also draws this to Japan. He says Japan had the highest life expectancy in the world, but Japanese Americans had a life expectancy about 2 full years higher than the rest in Japan. And Japan is 99% ethnic Japanese, so there's no confusion. In other words, it's sort of like when they pull the pay gap stat nowadays and they go, oh my gosh, look, women are paid, 85 cents to the dollar that every man is paid. And they say that, and when you hear it on its face, it sounds like discrimination. But then oftentimes what you find is that men are working longer hours and they are more in the workforce than women are. So of course they would be making more money. And it seems here that this individual is doing the same thing. He's throwing around, we have all this spending and these companies, these healthcare companies are growing, and yet our life expectancy is not growing. Yes, as Sean said, I think our healthcare system is broken. I think there are a lot of problems. I think few people would disagree with that. But that is simplifying an issue. He even admits in this manifesto. He said, "I know that it's more complex than this." By his own volition, he's acknowledging that this can't be reduced, but nevertheless, he contradicted himself with his own actions, because if he really believed that the situation was more complex, he wouldn't have done what he did, which was a very simple and brazen and despicable answer to this. And it's just terrible. Can you imagine his kids, this poor guy's kids?
You have kids? Does he have kids?
I think he does, yeah. I know he's a
Really?
wife, yes. Does Brian Thompson have kids?
No.
Two.
I know the CEO does. I thought you were talking about the murderer.
Oh, no, Luigi. No, Luigi does not have a kids. Oh, God. I've got to stop with that, but it's just too good. Okay, on to another story. You know, some of the things that many conservatives have been lamenting, and I totally share in this, is that this Luigi Mangione character has gotten far more attention than Thomas Matthew Crooks and the July 13th assassination attempt on Donald Trump. I mean, holy moly. That was what, 4 months ago, 5 months ago? And people have even when it was a month out, people had stopped talking about it, including conservatives. I remember just right over there on the Dennis and Julie set saying afterwards, we've got to thump this tub every single week because people are going to forget. They're going to want to forget. Can you imagine for a moment if it were Kamala Harris at a rally, or Joe Biden at a rally, or Hillary Clinton at a rally, or AOC at a rally? Do you think we would ever hear the end of it? No. And we shouldn't. But this Thomas Matthew Crooks, I Google him every once in a while, and you go to the news tab on Google, and the oldest articles are like 2 months old or 3 months old. It's crazy. And the House of Representatives, they had this task force, and we've talked about this before on Timeless. They released their final report yesterday on the 2 assassination attempts. Oh yeah, we're talking about just July 13th. Third time's the charm. There was also one just a few weeks later at the golf course in Florida. And so the House, as I said, released its final report, and here's what they found to synopsize it. Quote, the task force found that the tragic and shocking events in Butler, Pennsylvania were preventable. The various failures in planning, execution, and leadership on or before July 13th and the pre-existing conditions that underlied the efficacy of human and material assets deployed that day coalesced to create an environment in which the former president was exposed to grave danger. Now, according to one of the members of the task force, Representative Mike Kelly, who's a Republican from Pennsylvania, quote, the task force notes that as of the date of publication of this report, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI have not produced any documents responsive to the task force requests regarding the preparation for, events of, and response to the second assassination attempt that occurred on September 15th. So there appears to be some holdup with regard to the release of these documents. And this contributes to a unsettling air of secrecy that seems to have permeated these events. Not only with the fact that we really haven't heard very much about Thomas Matthew Crooks since that day, we haven't heard yet from his family, unless I'm mistaken. I don't think we have heard. We were promised earlier to hear from his father, as I recall, and we didn't hear from his family members. We also know that his body was cremated 10 days after the shooting, which is crazy that they would do that. It's very important for them to have the body because they can see where Thomas Matthew Crooks was shot, and they can determine from what angle the bullet entered him, and they can determine, was it the snipers on that roof or on that roof, how quickly did it enter, et cetera, et cetera. And then also another disturbing thing, and I talked about this back in, maybe September or October, the radio channels that local and state law enforcement were using to communicate with one another on that horrible day, July 13th, were not recorded, which is strange. the radio was experiencing technical difficulties. And one of those radio channels, as I'm reading here from the report, all of the local radio channels, not just one, were recorded on July 13th, but USSS radio transmitters were not. So forgive me, I was mistaken. The local law enforcement, they had their communications recorded, but the United States Secret Service radio channels were not recorded on that day. And look, are any one of these things a smoking gun of malfeasance? No. But it's just weird. It's just weird that there's not more information surrounding this day, and that there seem to be these coincidences of secrecy. The biggest one, I think, is the cremation of Thomas Matthew Crooks and then lip sealed about him. I mean, it's staggering how little we've heard about this guy.
There's a lot there to unpack. Real quickly, there are some differences. Donald Trump was not killed. I think that,
What do you mean
CEO
differences?
of UnitedHealthcare was killed.
Oh, I see.
Also, this is still going on, and it deserves attention. And there was attention to the Trump assassination at the time. The other thing that sprouts from these immediately is conspiracy theories. There's a lot of talk that this Luigi Mangione did not act alone, that he has co-conspirators that have yet to be figured out. Have you seen these rumors?
I have.
Yeah. But the fact that Trump was not killed, had he been killed...
Well, Corey Compatore was killed.
Yes, that's true. And I'm not taking anything away from the tragedy of that. I'm just saying, you were comparing earlier why this seems to be getting more attention than the Trump assassination. And I'm just saying there are differences.
There are differences, but we got to roll this clip again because because Trump wasn't killed, we kind of go like, oh, well, that's in the rearview mirror. He was a millimeter away from being killed. A millimeter. It is, I believe, literally an act of divine intervention that he was not killed. It was a last total craning of the neck that prevented his head being blown off and perhaps a civil war from ensuing. And so I get it, but this was such a big deal. And again, if it had been Joe Biden, I think we would still be hearing about it. I want us to replay this video. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take away from
I know
your
you're not.
point.
I know you're not.
I
hear
agree
your
with
point.
you. I'm just saying there are little subtle differences. And the overarching point is that your answer can be not murder if you disagree with something.
Yeah, believe it or not, it can be. Let's roll video 2. And then I'm going to talk about some more of the failures that the House report released about this day.
And that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Move to spare. Hold. When you're ready. On you.
Ready?
Move.
Up.
Move. Go.
Up. Hawkeye's here.
Hawkeye's here. Move it to the spare.
Spare, get ready. Spare, get ready.
We ready?
Down. Shoot down.
Are we good? Shooters down. Are we good to move?
Down. We're good to move.
Clear.
Let's move. Let's move.
I mean, I don't know. I hear you, Sean. I hear that there are differences. I can't understand why this is getting more attention than that day. And the continued lack of secrecy about it. Yeah, go ahead.
There's another difference.
Yeah, what is it?
Brooks is dead, and Mangione isn't.
True. That's a good point. That's a very good point. I do want to remind us quickly of just a few things here because there should be more outrage about this, that the committee released this report indicating the staggering failures, and yet few Americans seem to know or care. Okay, first one. The Secret Service were notified of credible intelligence of a threat, and they sent a special sniper team to the Butler, Pennsylvania rally specifically in response to that credible intelligence. Reading here from the report, U.S. Secret Service counter snipers, including the one who shot and killed Crooks, were sent to the rally in response to credible intelligence of a threat. This was the first time that a USS counter sniper team was assigned to a protectee other than the president, vice president, or presidential candidate who had been formally nominated by his or her party, because at that point he had not been nominated. So, okay, they knew that there was credible intelligence of a threat. They sent a specific counter sniper team in order to combat that threat. But yet, despite that, quote, the FBI did not know about Thomas Matthew Crooks prior to the assassination attempt. And there were all of these, chain of command issues. And we were talking about this with regard to Anthony Fauci a few weeks ago, where Anthony Fauci, I believe, if I recall the news story correctly, we talk about so much of them here, gave a testimony, and he was essentially saying, oh, well, the mask stuff wasn't up to me, it was up to these people. And this is what happens when there are so many cooks in the kitchen and something goes wrong. You can go, oh, well, that wasn't under my jurisdiction, that wasn't my responsibility, it was that guy, it was that guy, it was that guy. And then it all becomes convoluted and everyone is confused about who actually bears responsibility. And so we've got local law enforcement, we've got state law enforcement, we've got the Secret Service, we've got the U.S. Secret Service counter sniper team, we have the FBI. When obviously there's credible intelligence of a threat to the president of the United States, the FBI would appear, need to be involved. But yet, Crooks, quote, was not known to the FBI prior to this attempt. And key people were not notified of this, despite the sending of the counter sniper team. Of the Secret Service personnel interviewed by the committee, nearly all of them, including the intelligence advance agent and the special agent in charge of the Pittsburgh field office, said they were unaware of this credible intelligence of a threat. How does that make sense that a special counter sniper team was sent to the Butler rally in response to this intelligence, but the special agent in charge in the FBI said that they were not aware? Go ahead.
Oh, I think I said Brooks earlier, meant Crooks. You were talking about how he was cremated 10 days later.
Yeah.
They must have done the autopsy on the entry and exit wounds, right? I mean, you're not
10 days.
saying they
10
didn't
days
do
is
that.
pretty quick. No, maybe they did. I don't know whether or not they did, but it's just, that's quite quick.
And then the woman that was in charge of the FBI did step down
Of the Secret
over
Service.
this whole fiasco. Yeah.
Secret Service. All right, second thing. Each fact just gets more and more startling. The Secret Service on the day of the assassination were notified of a suspicious person with a rangefinder 27 minutes before Thomas Matthew Crooks fired. At 5:54 p.m., a report was relayed to the United States Secret Service security room and the counter sniper team leader that there was a suspicious person with a rangefinder. Okay, they were notified of that 27 minutes before. They should have been to the wall trying to find this guy. They had previous credible intelligence of a threat. They sent a special team, and then they have a suspicious guy with a rangefinder. They should have, as I said, been to the wall, and they should have delayed the start of the rally. The rally did not start until about 6:04, 6:05 p.m. 7.5 minutes into the rally at 6:11 p.m. was when Thomas Matthew Crooks fired his shot. They could have delayed it. It's not like the rally was going on and they would need to go up on stage and cause this whole fiasco and say, so sorry, we have to pause. By the way, I would even support that if it would mean the safety of the president. But it's just amazing that they didn't do that. But then shortly after, the USS personnel engaged on the ground effort to find the individual. But however, it says the Secret Service lead advance agent, site agents, and site counterpart all told the committee that they didn't receive this information. And they didn't know that local law enforcement identified a suspicious person with a rangefinder and that they lost track of this individual until after shots were fired.
Yeah, there were a lot of failures here.
Oh, I'm going on, honey.
Miscommunications between local and Secret Service. You see all the viral videos of people going, he's on the roof. There's a guy on the roof. There were so many failures. I would hope that moving forward, things are corrected, that they happen in a more calculated fashion. And here's the issue. It was implicated that these failures occurred because it was Trump.
What do you mean it was
some kind of,
implicated?
there was an effort to not protect Trump as some kind of conspiracy. And I don't know if that's true or it was just human dysfunction.
I wouldn't rule either out. I wouldn't rule both out. But I want to tell you a few more of these quickly because, again, it's just people don't know this, and it's so upsetting. 3 minutes before Crooks shot, law enforcement sent a radio alert that someone was on the roof. 3 minutes is a long time. If I were to pause this show right now and remain silent for 3 minutes and ask you to stare at me, you would get a sense of how very long of a time it is. That is plenty of time for them to radio comm over to someone and say, get the president off of the stage. There is a person on the roof. 3 minutes before the shots were fired, they sent out the radio alert. That's local law enforcement. And the information was only passed along to the U.S. Secret Service security room 2 minutes before the shots were fired. By the way, even if it were passed along 2 minutes, and that's a huge delay, it should have been passed on within 1 second. 2 minutes is still a long time to protect the president. What the hell happened in those 2 minutes? I want to know who got that alert and what they thought they were going to do. There were 2 separate communication centers, it appears, one local and then one of the Secret Service. The primary means of communications was a cell phone. So maybe that's why it took so long, because, some guy's radioing to another guy. There's a suspicious guy on the roof, and the guy's like, oh, I'm going to dial the Secret Service. 1555 Secret Service. Ring, ring, ring. Oh, hey, Bob. There's a suspicious guy on the roof. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding? This is obscene. They're communicating on a bleeping cell phone. They were on separate radio channels. Approximately 22 seconds before Crooks fired, a local officer sent out a radio alert that the individual on the roof was armed. But that wasn't relayed to U.S. Secret Service personnel. By the way, again, if we were to pause, that was only 5 seconds, and wait 22 seconds, that's plenty of time when they see that he's armed to dial on your damn iPhone or radio alert to someone who's next to the president to get him down on the floor and protect him. This is where, when people indicate, as Melania Trump did, as the sheriff of Martin County in Florida did, that there was some malfeasance, this is where that doesn't seem so conspiratorial. I'm not saying that we know for sure that there could have been supreme incompetence. There could have been malfeasance in the sense that there was just oversight, not like active participation, but just like, oh yeah, there's a guy on the roof, But this is too many levels, in my opinion, of incompetence to perhaps just be incompetence. Okay. 22 seconds, they radio, local law enforcement sends a radio alert that the guy on the roof is armed. That was not relayed to U.S. Secret Service personnel. And then, even worse, several USSS Secret Service officers were, quote, experiencing technical problems with their radio at the rally and told the committee that such problems are common for the Secret Service. Here's the hilarious part. A U.S. Secret Service Hercules 1 counter sniper was offered a local radio on July 13th, but he said he didn't have time to pick it up because he was too busy fixing technical problems with his other radio. In addition to that, the drone system, which would have been able to see that Thomas Matthew Crooks was armed and on the roof and would have been able to follow him when he was identified 27 minutes before the first shot was fired, that he was walking around with a rangefinder. The drone system had technical problems and was inoperable during the time of the rally. Quote, with no backup system, the Secret Service agent responsible for overseeing the drone capabilities at the July 13th rally called a toll-free 888 tech support hotline to troubleshoot with the company, which took several hours. That agent had only 3 months of experience working with that equipment and lacked knowledge about it. So we know that there was credible intelligence of a threat. They sent a special counter sniper team to the rally in response to that. A suspicious person 27 minutes before the rally was identified with a rangefinder. The site agent of the Secret Service did not have any idea. They were like, oh God, we can't find him. We lost him. Then 3 minutes before the shot is fired, he's on the roof. 1-800, oh, hi, he's on the roof. They're communicating with a cell phone to the Secret Service. Their radios are on separate channels, and at that, they're not working. And their drone doesn't work, and they were calling the 888 number to see if the drone could be fixed.
And
Cool.
they didn't cover that roof. That roof was not covered.
That's the
And it
biggest
was-
travesty of all.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And on that point,
And remember,
too,
the FBI director said, oh, we couldn't have them on the roof because it was slanted.
really, yeah, I had forgotten that.
But, yeah.
Well, here's another part here. Local law enforcement raised concern about that roof a few days before, and they said that they didn't have the manpower to secure it. State and local law enforcement were responsible for covering that roof, according to the committee. But a member of the Butler Emergency Service Unit told the committee that he notified Secret Service during a walkthrough 2 days before that they didn't have the manpower to lock down that building. Anyway, my whole point, forgive me. My whole point is I want people to know about this, and I want them to be just as fired up and outraged about this as they are about Mr. Luigi. Now, I was going to transition into my ad read, but I do not have it, so you are going to have to email me with my ad read.
Did we not send that into you?
No, we did. You did not send that in to me, but that's okay. Because we'll talk for our final few minutes about the 2 gospel stories today, continuing with our month of December gospel special to increase our biblical literacy and to get into the spirit of the month of December.
Would you like me to tell people about my pillow?
Oh my God. Wow. I could just get a little vacation. Whoo!
Yeah.
Don't
why
mind
you
if I
kick
do.
back, relax, throw on your My Slippers, and enjoy.
Go. Do it.
My Pillow is excited to announce that their Christmas extravaganza is finally here. Get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. They won't last long, so get them while you can. Their famous My Slippers that Julie loves and wears every day.
Facts.
These haven't been on sale for over a year. They're regularly priced at $119.98, but for a limited time, they're now only $59.98. And their 6-piece towel sets are back in stock with extremely limited quantities for only $29.98. There are hundreds of My Pillow products. There's something for everyone on your Christmas list. Bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-566-6745 and be sure to use the promo code Hartman, Hartman, to save on all My Pillow products. That's promo code Hartman. Flannel sheets for as low as $59.98 or the 6-piece towel set for just $29.98. But that's not all. They're extending their 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2025. Plus, all orders $75 or more ship absolutely free.
That was the best minute of my life. I was so enjoying relaxing. Oh, could have gotten my nails done. Could have gotten a spa treatment. But you got to sell it, Sean. You got to really sell it. That was very reedy. Forgive me. But you got to be like, these damn quilts. They're so good. It's okay. I'm grateful for what you did. You did a good job.
I'll try to work on that.
Do you have any My Pillow products?
I have a My Pillow, and I had the My Slippers, but I have dogs, and the dogs like the My Slippers more than I did.
Dennis's dogs like my
Yeah.
my slippers and my other shoes, which is annoying. Okay, so quickly, let's talk about these 2 gospel stories. I gotta say, this one may be one of my favorites out of all of them. Christ and the adulterous woman. Let's look at it. A picture from Heinrich Hartman from 1889. This is picture 5 of this event. I know I've said it many times with regard to these stories, but it can't be said enough. We in the modern day have no appreciation for how completely radical this idea was. That if you are an adulterous woman, you can be forgiven and not stoned to death. Still, in other cultures, as we know, Iran, if you are an adulterous woman, you are stoned to death. So this is still a moral invention. This is from the Gospel of John. I think the response here of Christ is one of the best ever. And he goes to the temple. He sees a crowd of people, including teachers of religious law, that the Pharisees brought a woman who had committed adultery. and they're lining up to stone her. And they say to Jesus, "Rabbi, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" And he says, again, probably my favorite line of his, "Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." And one by one, these people start walking away, and Jesus was left alone in the middle of the crowd with the woman where the crowd had been. And Jesus goes over to her and says, "Where are your accusers? Didn't every one of them condemn you?" And she said, "No." And Jesus says, "Neither do I. Go forth and sin no more." The fact that this happened, again, was such a revolutionary thing. We can't overstate that Christ is the one who judges, and that if you are a sinner, you should take caution before throwing the first stone. I love that. I know this is a seemingly innocuous thing to compare it to, but think about all the people who talk about the existential threat of climate change, and they're talking all the damn time about how we're all going to be underwater in a matter of 5 years because of climate change. And many of them live a life that is totally not in accordance with their purported concern about climate change. One of the things that red-pilled me beyond belief during BLM was seeing many of my affluent peers who live in dormant buildings in New York City or live behind gates in Brentwood, California, going out and protesting for the abolition of the police or the defunding of the police. And they were living behind their gates. And this principle that if you are essentially committing this same thing, you should take some caution before throwing the first stone, that kind of level of moral reconnaissance that this impels you to do is incredibly powerful. And so many people feel like they're high on a perch, that they have the right to condescend to others and to tell others whether their actions are right and wrong. And I think this is just a spectacular mirror that he compels people to do. Because in most societies, people are not judged based on right or wrong. They're judged by their position. If you're a man, you have a right to tell a woman what to do. If you're of a higher caste or of a more favored ethnicity or a favored sectarian group, then that immediately gives you the right to be the moral authority. And this is a way of just leveling the playing field. So it's spectacular. The next story, the final one that we'll talk about, is the raising of Lazarus. And this was one that I kind of struggled to see the deeper meaning. And, I think, too, we don't necessarily have to always read a deeper meaning into every single story. That was one of the things that I lamented when I was in English class in high school. We would read about these parts of novels, and my teacher would say, "What do you think the significance of the river is in this passage or of this, event?" And I would be like, "Oh my God, I don't know what the significance of the river is." It's a dangerous thing to read too much into events. But this story is very steeped in deeper meaning. So Lazarus was a man who was sick, and his two sisters, Martha and Mary, sent a message to Jesus saying, "Our brother Lazarus and your dear friend is very sick." When Jesus heard this is according to the Gospel of John, he said, "Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this." As we know, Jesus heals Lazarus or raises him from the dead. And so we can understand what he means there when he says that it happened for the glory of God. But I think, as trite as it may sound, or as searching for some kind of meaning in despair as this may seem, I do think that sometimes illnesses and tragedies in life have a way of evincing the glory of God. Obviously, to speak in a very personal way, seeing my friend Dennis in his state in the hospital has certainly given me, in some ways, that impression, because the way that he is dealing with his illness the way that he is demonstrating such strength and dignity and fortitude. I said to him the other day, I said, Dennis, I thought I admired you before this, and I surely did, but seeing how you have handled this, to use a Christian term, seeing the way that you are bearing this cross makes me respect you even more. And it really is because of Dennis's biblical wisdom, the fact that he is so buried in these principles, that he is demonstrating this preternatural dignity and grace through this debilitating illness in a way that is a kind of glory of God. This is the test of his principles that he has been espousing for 40 years. And he is living up to that test. And through his ability to still have humor and to still have joy and hope, he is glorifying those very principles that are enabling him to demonstrate such things. And so if we look for that in sickness and in incidences of despair, we can actually see the glory of God. Again, I completely recognize that that's a very flowery way to view it. It's a very difficult thing to always see the glory of God in these terrible things, but it is there. So Jesus says he's going to go down to the tomb of Lazarus. His disciples say, "What the heck are you doing, my friend? You're going to Judea. This is where people were trying to stone you." And he replies, he says, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I will now go and wake him up." They say, "Lord, if he's sleeping, he will soon get better." By the way, the Gospels have some of these funny instances where the disciples are just not understanding Jesus, and they have these very kind of innocent replies like, "Well, if he's sleeping, don't wake him up. Let him heal." And that's when Jesus said, "No, Lazarus is dead." That's what I mean by he's sleeping. So he goes down to the house of Martha and Mary, Lazarus' sisters. And Mary says to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But now I know that God will give you whatever you ask." And Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." And she understands it in this kind of kingdom of heaven, afterlife sense. Martha says, "Yes, he will rise when everyone rises at the last day." And Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this, Martha?" And Martha says, "Yes, I've always believed that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God." And then Jesus, seeing her weep and seeing the friends of Lazarus, weep, he becomes angry. And by the way, that's an interesting thing. It doesn't say he becomes sad. He becomes angry. And that indicates that he has a disdain, to put it mildly, for death and for the evil that has come into the world. And that I think what this story is endeavoring to show is not just that he's a miracle worker, but he is the antidote to those very things. The fact that he is a visceral anger to them evinces that he is the antidote to the terrible suffering and evilness of death. He becomes angry when he sees the way that this evilness has affected people, seeing people weep. And he says, "Where have you put him?" And they say, "Come and see." And then some of them start to kind of give Jesus a run for his money. They say, "This man," i.e. Jesus, "he's healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" And Jesus goes, "Well, okay, I'll show you." He says, "Roll the stone aside." Martha cuts in and says, "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell is not going to be great." And Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" And he shouted, "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out, reading from John, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. And Jesus told them, "Unwrap him and let him go." Yes, what you're looking at right now is Rembrandt's The Raising of Lazarus, in 1630. So again, what we can take away here is that Jesus is the antidote to death. He's angry by the evil and despair of death. And also, I think it is worth noting that he does have these supernatural powers. And we talk about on Dennis and Julie, and ever more recently with Dennis's sickness, the power of prayer. And although this story doesn't at least seem to have anything to do with prayer, I think it evinces something that we've talked about in tandem with prayer. And that is that God doesn't want slaves. God wants to interact with our free will as human beings in order to bring the best possible outcome. And there's a lot of evidence for this. I mean, the greatest one is that Abraham bargained God down before God went to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham said to God, well, what if there are 50 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah? And God said, okay, I won't destroy it if there are 50. And then Abraham bargains him down more, 45. And God says, okay, I won't if there's 45, 40, et cetera, and bargains God down to 10. I mean, that's an amazing thing that Abraham had this ability to challenge God, and God, in turn, negotiated essentially and came to a different outcome. And that's what I see here. Throughout the Bible, it is no sin to challenge God. We talked about this with the apostles yesterday. Thomas was saying after Christ was risen from the dead, after he was crucified, I don't believe it. I'm going to have to put my hand in his wound in order to believe it. Here we see that Martha, the sister of Lazarus, says, you healed the blind. Why couldn't you have kept him from dying? And then Jesus rises him from the dead. And so again, I think this shows that if we plead to God, it may not always result in the outcome that we want, but God, if he sees that it is righteous, may want to interact with our free will. And it's not just that he has decided something and gone ahead and done it. A lot of the times these pleas are what compels him to act. And so those are the two for today. And I love doing this. I hope that you find it to be meaningful. I've gotten really good responses over email, which I'm delighted about. And you can email me about this and anything. And especially, I request some prayers and some good messages for Dennis at julie@julie-hartman.com. I love hearing from you. And as I said at the start, be sure to check out Sean and Julie this Sunday at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern, right here on the Julie Hartman YouTube channel. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.